There is an ancient superfood that boosts your immune system, supports your healthy gut and digestion system, and supplies all the vital nutrients and vitamins to your body. And it only takes 1 hour to prepare months of supply of it. Yes, I'm talking about fermented foods. Hey guys, my name is Anastasia and welcome to Happy Bellyfish channel. In today's video, I'm going to teach you several ways to make delicious fermented vegetables and basically fermented anything. You know, right? You can ferment pretty much any type of food out there. And a lot of people think that you need some complicated things for fermentation, that you need a lot of equipment, you need particular types of ingredients. It can't be further from truth. Actually, to be technically correct, if you want to ferment vegetables, everything you need for the fermentation to happen is the vegetable itself, because it has all the beautiful bacteria on the vegetable itself that's necessary to start the fermentation process. But I'm not here to be too technical with you. I actually want to give you the exact ways and measurements that you can use to ferment your vegetables. The most common method that's used for fermentation is called brining method. This is when you create a salty solution. Basically, you dissolve salt in water. Then you fill in the jar with any type of vegetable that you love. Throw in your favorite aromatics and your favorite spices, perhaps some of the greens that you love as well. And you pour the salty solution on top. Then you close your jar and leave the wonderful bacteria, good healthy bacteria, do all the job. And when you pour this salt water over your vegetables, you really want to make sure that all vegetables, all spices and whatever is in your jar ready for fermentation is completely covered by that brine. Because what's happening is your jar is you want to create the anaerobic environment, which means you don't want any oxygen to actually touch your veggies and other products that are here to ferment. At the same time, you do want some air to escape because, you know, during the fermentation process, some gases will build up, so you really want them to come out and to make sure that no explosion of your jar is happening. And here many people are asking, okay, it sounds really complicated. I have to make sure there is no oxygen. How do I do that? Do I need any particular jars and equipment? Well, there is a lot of fermentation equipment available out there. You'll find all the possible mason jars. You'll find particular airlocks and the jars that exactly don't let any oxygen in but let it out. Some people also ferment in vacuum plastic bags, also to make sure that no oxygen enters them. And you can absolutely use those devices, but please be sure that you don't need them. If you follow the traditional fermentation styles, it was really done just in a jar. You just have to make sure that everything is submerged in the brine. You don't necessarily need an airlock for that. Even though the airlocks might kind of help you if you're not a confident fermenter, you don't need it. You might want to add some weight, you know, just press your veggies to make sure that they don't stick out. You might want to make sure that your vegetables are packed really, really tightly in the jar, but generally it can be really enough. How to know if things are going right or wrong? Just watch the top of your jar. Your main indication is the formation of mold. Yeah, if there is no mold forming, then nothing is wrong. If there is something funny happening on top, then you might want to make sure that it's actually not the mold that's forming on the top. And as I promised, here's your formula for the vegetables. It's considered to be the kind of safest and easiest formula. Use any solution between 2 to 2.5% of salt. So how do you measure it? What does it mean, 2 and 2.5% of salt? Basically, you weigh the amount of water that you use for the brine, you weigh the amount of vegetables, and 2% of that weight is how much salt you really want to use. And here you go. Now I need to tell you that if you really want to reach perfection in terms of textures and colors and flavors, you might want to dig a little bit deeper of how much salt in combination with which ingredients and vegetables is needed for your jars, but it's not necessary for beginners. These are the things that are not found in the research papers of how much salt is perfect for the pumpkin or for the winter squash or for the carrots or for the cauliflowers. It's something that's been tested by generations of fermenters. So your traditional recipes will give you the best indication how to get the best flavor result. The other method of fermenting vegetables that's usually overlooked, I really want you to take note of that. It's a kimchi method, which also exists in different countries where it's not called kimchi, but this method is used to ferment vegetables with a lot of flavor. And kimchi method is not just about fermenting the napa cabbage. You can actually ferment any type of veggie you want, or even mushrooms with that particular method. So what is the kimchi method? It's quite simple, though the preparation will depend on what type of vegetable you want to process. You create a spicy paste, and usually as a base of the paste is onions, garlic, ginger, and lots of chili or paprika and many different spices. There are a lot of endless flavors combinations. You can be really adventurous, or you can also look for ready recipes. And basically, you take the veggies of your choice and you cover with this spicy paste. You can also add things like soy sauce and other stuff, depending on your flavor preferences, and just pack it in the jar very tightly again, and again you leave it to ferment. Keep in mind that if you use the kimchi method, you don't want to leave your jars outside for too long. You want to keep it in the fridge after maybe a maximum of 1 week of fermentation. Otherwise, it might get a little bit too sour and too soft. If all these things that I'm talking here sound a little bit intimidating, I'd love to invite you to check our online healthy school, happybellyfish.com, because we have some really cool free fermentation classes there, and also fermentation challenges when you can ferment pretty much in a live regime with other people from all over the world, and be also guided by the instructors and do in safe environment all your favorite fermented foods, and maybe discover even new ones. You can make all type of kimchi and sauerkraut and brine veggies and mushrooms and even grains and beans. Oh my gosh, I can't stop. When I talk about fermented foods, I realize that it's an infinite, beautiful world of flavors, textures and colors. And the last method of vegetable ferments that I'd love to share with you is called dry salting method. Well, again, it sounds too technical and fancy, but basically what you think about is sauerkraut. For your vegetables, the water and extra paste are absolutely not necessary for fermentation. Some vegetables have so much juice of its own that that's enough to ferment them. And great examples of the vegetables that you can ferment by using dry salting method are, of course, cabbage, radishes, and for instance fennel as well. If you're too adventurous and you want to go towards fruits, then try out lemons. The classic preserved lemons are also created by dry salting method. So what is it, this dry salting method? It's when you take your veggie or a different ingredient, add your spice, add the salt, rub it very nicely, let salt help the veggie release the juice, and then you pack it in the jar or any other fermentation vessel. Can be a crock pot if you go completely traditional way. You pack it so tightly that your veggies are covered by this juice, which becomes a brine in itself, and you let it ferment. The dry salting method is one of my most favorite because the brine that comes out of it, the fermented juice, is so rich in flavor, and you might also be able to use less salt for those kind of ferments versus the brining method. Alright guys, I hope I really made you curious about all the opportunities that you can create with fermented foods, and as you see, there are so many ways and flavors. And if you didn't know, actually the brine and that fermented juice are the great food supplements on its own. Look here, I'm having some gorgeous beet kvass. You know what the beet kvass is? It sounds really fancy, but it's just fermented beets, and this is the juice and the brine of your fermented beets. And if you wonder how to eat all those gorgeous fermented vegetables, check out my previous video on how to eat fermented foods. Chin chin, and see you in the next video.